All right, so with that, I'll get started. So that picture up there is the Long Island Sound, as we all know. It's that body of water between Connecticut and Long Island. And the Long Island Sound is an estuary, and estuaries are typically bodies of water where fresh water from rivers meets and mixes with salt water from the ocean. And this results in what's known as brackish water, which is somewhere in between in terms of salinity. So estuaries are transitional ecosystems. It's nature transforming from land to ocean. And because of that, estuaries tend to play really important roles in the ecosystem. One of these roles is that they serve as natural filters. So a lot of those sediments brought by rivers and the fresh water actually stay in the estuary and don't make it out into the open ocean, which is a good thing to preserve water quality in the oceanic shore. Another form of filtering that estuaries do is that a lot of them have salt marshes like the one you see in the picture. So if you have a really rainy day like we had today in Long Island, and you have a lot of runoff going towards the water, bringing with it excess nutrients, maybe from fertilizers, from people's lawns and different kinds of pollutants, the peat and the grass in those salt marshes actually serves as a sponge and kind of buffers the impact of those nutrients and decreases the pollution that actually reaches the water. Estuaries are also among the most productive ecosystems in the world. They create more organic matter each year than comparably sized forests and grasslands and agricultural land. And this is in part because of all of these nutrients that they absorb, right? So because of that, it's really not a surprise that estuaries are among they're very lively ecosystems. They support a lot of different organisms, animals and plants alike. So one common characteristics of a lot of estuaries is you might find adapted species, so species that have adapted to the brackish waters and the constantly changing environment in an estuary, whether those adaptations are physiological or behavioral. So oysters, for example, they'll open up when the high tide is in and it's saltier, and then they'll close up when it's low tide and the salinity is lower. So terrapins, like the one pictured there, are among the only turtles that we have here in the Sound that actually thrive in brackish water. They have glands around their eyes to help remove that excess salt from their system. And then we have pickleweed, which is that picture there on the left. It's a succulent, and it's one of the most salt-resistant plants that we have in salt marshes around the Sound. Estuaries are also a very common stopover site for migratory birds. And again, this has a lot to do with the fact that estuaries are very productive ecosystems, and so there's a lot of food to be had in estuaries. And there's also a lot of food for birds because estuaries are natural nurseries. So there's a lot of fish that spend part of their life cycle or a majority of their life cycle in the ocean or in the open ocean. And then they'll come into estuaries and swim upstream to spawn and spend part of their juvenile life cycle in the estuary until they're ready to head back out into the ocean. And we know that in the Sound there are about 50 species that use this ecosystem for that purpose. I also included a bullet on the diverse habitats, and this is just because I want to once again point out that estuaries, especially like one like Long Island Sound, which is the second largest in the nation after the Chesapeake, they're within estuaries, there's a lot of really different habitats, again, supporting the wide variety of organisms. And habitats is something that I'll talk a little bit more later today too. Apart from the ecological importance of estuaries, estuaries are super important economically as well. In fact, of the 32 largest cities in the world, 22 of them are directly adjacent to estuaries, including New York City. In the case of the Sound, more than 4 million people live in coastal communities around it, and more than 23 million people live within 50 miles of its shores. So most of us probably know by experience that, especially in the summer, there's a lot going on in the Sound, right? We have ferries moving people to and fro in Connecticut, from Connecticut to New York, Long Island and back, right? We have cargo ships coming into the estuary and bringing goods to the different harbors and the different cities. We have commercial fisheries and shell fishing, and we have recreational fishing. We have anglers that look for bluefish and tautog and winter flounder and a wide variety of other fish. And we also have tourism, right? There's a lot of beach going and kayaking, although I do want to give a shout out to this lady. I like this picture because I think it, you know, it embodies recreationing, but she's actually a citizen scientist removing invasives in the Connecticut River. Those plants you see in her kayak are invasives, so shout out to her. But basically, because of all of these activities that the Sound supports, it's estimated that it contributes about $9.4 billion annually to the local economy. So clearly it's a really important resource. And because of that, in 1987, Congress established it as an estuary of national significance. 2 years prior to that, in 1985, Congress established the Long Island Sound Study. So that's the program that I work for. And the Long Island Sound Study is one of 28 national estuary programs in the nation. And these programs essentially, you know, like their name suggests, the purpose of these programs is to help protect a nationally important estuary. So in our case, the Long Island Sound Study is a partnership between the EPA and a couple of environmental agencies in New York and Connecticut, such as New York Sea Grant, Connecticut Sea Grant, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So together, what we do essentially is we help coordinate the different environmental efforts that are going on in the region, essentially to help restore and conserve and protect the estuary into the future. And those efforts encompass a wide variety of things: monitoring, research, outreach, education, habitat restoration, really a lot going on. So as you might imagine, especially in a watershed of this size, there really is a lot to be done in environmental management. And this is really just a really broad view of how we do it and how we approach it. So we have 4 main themes or 4 main focuses. One of them, that first one on the left, is clean waters and healthy watersheds. So this one basically works with water quality. So this is where we work with marine debris. This is where we work with stopping excess nutrients from reaching the Sound, etc. That second one we have is thriving habitats and abundant wildlife. And you see there how native species are one of the pillars. So a lot of the work that we do with invasive species, which is an ongoing battle, is under this theme. The third theme is sustainable and resilient communities. And this is also a really wide, really broad umbrella, and a lot of different work falls under it. But what I do want to point out is you'll see that one of the pillars is education and stewardship. So for us, it's really significant to have communities be able to be involved in the conservation of their resources, right, if they so choose. That fourth theme is sound science and inclusive management. And again, you see one of those pillars is citizen science. But this theme is basically making sure that we have the best research, that we have the best science available, the best tools available in order to do what we do and to make decisions about what are the priorities that we should be looking at right now and what should we be focusing on. It's been a long day. But what can we focus on into the future in terms of conservation? So with that in mind, we've identified 12 priority habitats for restoration around the Sound watershed. And I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about habitats again, and here they are. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that this is not an exhaustive list. These are just our priority habitats. But when we're talking about coastal habitats, and this is just nice to keep in mind going into the Bioblitz, when we're talking about coastal habitats, we're not necessarily just talking about beaches. Really, there's a lot of different habitats that require monitoring within the watershed, and data pretty much anywhere would be useful. So when we're talking about restoration in terms of invasive species, we're not just talking about going into an ecosystem and removing invasives and calling it a day. What we're actually talking about is site management plans, and what that means is that you design a comprehensive plan to try to avoid reinvasion from happening. So that might mean removing invasives, and then perhaps taking off that surface layer of soil, replacing it with new filling, maybe planting native plants in there, maybe installing green infrastructure, etc. So we've been doing this work for a while now. And in 2019, last year, we were able to restore about 54.1 acres of coastal habitat. And since 1998, that has totaled 2,056 acres of coastal habitat restored. So we're really happy, with the work that's been done, and there's still a long way to go. But as you saw in that slide I showed you about the four focuses, or the four themes, a really important element to everything that we're doing is stewardship and is citizen science, because without involvement of the public, a lot of this work that has been done would be really, really difficult to do. There's a lot of ground to cover, and there are a lot of invasives. Volunteers are involved in monitoring. Volunteers have been involved, like you saw that lady in the kayak, in removing invasives. Property owners who have worked with us to have site management plans in their properties, and some have come and helped replant areas during rehabilitation. So involvement of the public is always very much needed. And especially now with this pandemic, so a lot of this monitoring that would have happened during the summer months, as you might imagine, is not happening, or is very, very limited. And so that's the idea behind this Bioblitz, and that's where this all comes in. So with that, I'll stop sharing now, Lindsay, and I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jimena. Thank you, Nancy and Karen, for your help today. I'm Lindsay, and I'm going to be taking you through this training for our Bioblitz coming up, which is very exciting. I just want to introduce myself. I know that, sometimes over Zoom, these talks can seem a bit impersonal, so that's me. I've been a field project and outreach coordinator with the Long Island Invasive Species Management area since last December. So I'm kind of new to ecological work with Long Island, but I did grow up here at the border of Queens and Nassau County. And it's really fun to be back, working with Long Island in a whole new way, learning about the ecology, which I didn't really have much exposure to growing up in a very urban area. So like I said, I work with the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area, and our goal is to protect Long Island's local ecosystems from invasive species. The Long Island Invasive Species Management Area is one of 8 organizations around the state that were contracted by the Department of Environmental Conservation to coordinate invasive species work in the region. So you can see that in the map here, New York State is kind of broken up into several different regions, and Long Island Invasive Species Management Area covers Long Island and Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. And all of these organizations, these partnerships, they all do similar work, basically coordinating organizations and efforts to deal with invasive species. They provide recommendations for prioritizing invasive species control, planning recommendations, and a lot of what we do, like Jimena was saying, depends on citizen scientists. And it's really important to us to spread the word. The more people that are aware of invasive species, the better. We also do early detection monitoring and often direct control as well. And we'll get in a little bit more into that. But really, again, the goal is to protect Long Island's awesome local ecology. And Jimena did a phenomenal job explaining how important the estuary that is Long Island Sound is, you know, economically, socially, you know, in many ways. And I just want to point out that Long Island really does have a very unique natural heritage. This map shows habitat types in the state of New York that are considered relatively rare. The habitats that you see, all of those spots are habitats that occur less than 20 times throughout the state. So they're considered rare. And I just want to point out how many little dots and shapes you can see all along Long Island, and many of them are along the coast. So, you know, our work and our work with the Long Island Sound Study is about not only you know, preserving these important ecosystems for you know, economic reasons and all of that, but also for the natural heritage, the unique natural heritage that these ecosystems represent. So again, like Jimena was saying, these ecosystems are really important for us in many ways. You know, she mentioned that they soak up pollutants, you know, when runoff is going out to sea. And I won't go too much into detail because she covered this really well, but, you know, just to highlight that the work that we do is sort of to protect these phenomenal ecosystems, both for their value to us, and the services that they provide to us, the benefits that they provide to us, and also because of their unique natural heritage. I do want to point out that the estuaries are able to, the estuary, Long Island Sound, is able to support us in these many ways and provide these benefits when it's functioning properly as an ecosystem. And that's really important because basically what invasive species do is that they chip away at those you know, benefits, those ecosystem functions that make the estuary so valuable to us. So let's go into it now. The problem is invasive species, and what exactly are invasive species? We've been talking a lot about them today. Basically, invasive species are any species, plant, animal, aquatic, terrestrial, anything that's non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. The keystone feature of an invasive species is the harm that it causes. So there are many non-native species that, you know, that we find for various reasons, many garden species, for example, that people have brought in. Invasive species are only those that actually cause harm to the native ecosystems. So it's a subset. And what does it actually mean to cause harm to an ecosystem? Well, basically, these invasive species, they result in habitat degradation and loss. They basically outcompete native species and spread throughout ecosystems, you know, rapidly. And so, you know, you lose the habitat, you lose the native wildlife, fish, plants, birds, et cetera, you know, that use that native habitat. You can also lose recreational opportunities and sometimes income that comes from those recreational opportunities, or even from you know, agriculture. There are invasive species that are agricultural pests. There are invasive species that sometimes bring diseases to humans and livestock. For example, non-native tick species. And you know, there are some invasive species that prevent risks to public safety as well. So I'm just going to go through a few examples of coastal invasive species. Perennial pepperweed is an invasive sort of weed. It's currently, as far as we know, it only occurs at West Meadow Beach and Flax Pond in sort of the nearby vicinity. It spreads quickly throughout sandy sort of habitats. It can grow in shade. It outcompetes various shrubs that belong in the ecosystem and that are really important. Like, for example, seaside goldenrod. It occupies the same habitat and outcompetes seaside goldenrod. And that's an important food source for migrating monarch butterflies that are coming up the coast and other pollinators too. just by, kind of covering these sandy areas that might have been open. Perennial pepperweed can also overtake nesting habitat for, sensitive species like diamondback terrapins and piping plovers. Piping plovers considered endangered in New York. And generally speaking, it's replacing these areas that are good habitat with habitat that's not really good. These native species didn't evolve with these, something like perennial pepperweed. So it doesn't know how to, these species don't know how to use it. They can't really use it for much. They can't really eat it. They don't know how to shelter in it, etc. So that's kind of what makes a species harmful to an ecosystem. And in terms of what perennial pepperweed looks like, I have two pictures here for you. The top one is sort of what it looks like early in the season when it's still small. It kind of looks like, it has sort of teeth along the leaves. And to me, it kind of looks like upside down chili peppers sticking up out of the ground. It has a distinctive shape. But when it grows up a bit, it gets quite tall, like a goldenrod, if you're familiar with that. It sort of becomes sort of similar. And it puts out this white flower. Around now, I believe. It should be flowering soon, if not now. Another example of an invasive species is the Asiatic sand sedge. And I actually have a video to show you. Steve Young is a botanist who has worked in the state, all over the state of New York for a long time. And he put out a wonderful short video about this Asiatic sand sedge. So I'll let you hear it directly from him.
Here we have Carex kobomuji, or Asiatic sand sedge, in the rockaways of Long Island. It's forming a dense stand below the plants of beech, goldenrod, and spartina, where in the distance you can see usually it's open sand. Here now we have a dense stand of Carex kobomuji. These plants reproduce by rhizomes and are all connected by these rhizomes, and again form some really dense stands here in the sand. If we zoom in, you can see dug up one of the plants here, has carex-like leaves which arch out from the top, has a white base, and if you dig it up from the sand, it has a long rhizome which comes out from the bottom. Here's a separate spike on a separate stalk. The bracts are very pointy on the spikes, and if you walk on them in your bare feet, it's very unpleasant. This probably has the most arching leaves of any plant on the beach. Hands up and down the leaves, they're very rough. Sometimes you'll be able to see scattered plants on the beach, and you can recognize them again by those arching leaves and sawtooth edge.
All right, so there it is from Steve. And he did a great job of describing what the species looks like, and touched on what it does, which is that similarly to other invasive species, I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Similar to other invasive species, this plant basically takes over what would have been really good habitat for, let's say, piping plovers and diamondback terrapin nests, and replaces it with habitat that's really not usable by these species that we care about so much. Another plant that I wanted to mention is Waterwheel, and this one isn't actually, it doesn't occur in saltwater, it doesn't occur in estuaries, but it does occur in nutrient-poor acidic freshwater wetlands. A lot of Long Island's wetlands are unique because of their proximity to the coast. That makes them distinctive from other wetlands, other ponds and lakes. And they fit this description perfectly. So waterwheel is a carnivorous aquatic species that is perfectly suited to this kind of habitat, and can take it over, sort of forming a mat across the top. If you see in the top left corner, it shows the plant. It floats on the surface, and it sort of is like a stalk with a bunch of layers of leaves. And at the end of each leaf, you'll see in the second picture from the top on the left, it's a whirl of carnivorous traps. At the end of each spoke is a carnivorous trap that eats all kinds of insect and insect larvae. And I encourage you to Google this plant. It's really wild. There's a YouTube video, there's probably several, but I saw one showing, you know, the speed of the trap closure. It's insanely fast, like the snap of your fingers. We do have a native carnivorous aquatic species that inhabits similar habitats. It's called bladderwort, and there's a picture of it sort of below the text here. But the traps are much more intermittent throughout the plant, and they're much, much smaller. So the native bladderwort is eating you know, microscopic organisms, microinvertebrates, and like phytoplankton size creatures. So there's currently no equivalent species that would eat insect larvae and insects of the size that Waterwheel would consume. And that could be really detrimental to some really important species that we have in these ecosystems, like the tiger salamander, which is considered endangered on Long Island as well. You know, so while we're focusing on estuaries today, and of course the Long Island Sound, I did just want to give a shout out here, because these particular habitats, these coastal ponds, even though they're freshwater, they are unique because of their proximity to the coast and to the estuary. The last species I want to go over is the Chinese mitten crab. This one maybe you've heard of. I believe it was in the news a few weeks ago. It's a delicacy, I think. So there's sort of a market for it, is my understanding, but it's not legal to actually ship into the US. So there was some kind of a bust in the news where they caught people shipping the Chinese mitten crab. This crab actually influences a wide range of habitats. It's what they call catadromous, which means that it's born in a marine environment, but it migrates through freshwater rivers and sort of settles in those rivers and in, you know, wetlands near the coast. This crab is incredibly detrimental to the ecosystems around it because it's what they call a detritivore. It eats almost everything that it finds, living, dead. It's just a voracious eater. And so it's literally eating, you know, native species and competing with them that way. Another reason that this crab is problematic is because it burrows into riverbanks, and you can see, you know, that the bank in the picture underneath the text here, it's full of holes, and that's destabilizing. You know, and when we talk about, you know, our riverbanks, Jimena touched on this, that our riverbanks do, you know, similar to estuaries, they act as sponges, they act as buffers, you know, for pollutants, but also for flooding. You know, when a river or an estuary, when the water level goes up because of a rainstorm or maybe climate change, those coasts are really important for acting as a buffer. And when, you know, these crabs burrow into these riverbanks, they cause them to collapse, and that function is lost. These crabs are incredibly fast. They can walk up to 11 miles per day, which is wild. And if you think you might have seen one, they're very distinctive. They have, in the top left corner, you can kind of see, looking up from the bottom, they have these fuzzy mittens for which they are named on their claws. And it actually is like fuzz. It's hard to see because it's kind of matted. You know, this crab obviously came from a wetland or an estuary of some kind, so the fur is like matted to the claws, but it is fuzz fur. So what makes these species successful? You know, why are they such a problem for our native species? Well, it comes down to the fact that they have some kind of advantage that's allowing them to overtake the native species in the ecosystem. So some of them grow rapidly, or you know, kind of get started early in the season. They can take advantage of food, or if they're a plant, light before the species around them. Many of them are easily spread and tolerant of many conditions. Some of them have reproductive advantages. A plant like Waterwheel, for example, can reproduce from a tiny fragment of that plant, which makes it, easily spread. So that's a reproductive advantage, an example of a reproductive advantage. Sometimes they're long-lived. Often they're extremely resilient, and especially they thrive in areas of disturbance. So places that, maybe were dug up or cleared, or disturbed in some other way. And, for better or worse, those are conditions that humans are creating all the time. An important aspect of what makes these species successful is that, all of the predators that would have feasted on them back in their native range are not here. So those populations are kind of growing unchecked. They don't have any predators, here. Another aspect to this is that, these species are able to thrive in areas of disturbance, like I said, cleared areas, or areas that have been dug up or something like that. But at the same time, there's another component to this, which is that they thrive when ecosystems are otherwise at risk. So if an ecosystem is, for some reason it's polluted, or it's fragmented, or for some reason, its health has been compromised, the native species, they don't have the ability to fight off these invasive species that come in. They don't have the strategies. They didn't co-evolve with these species. And so, it's kind of, they don't almost have like the immunity to it. And it kind of sounds familiar. I mean, we've heard a lot of rhetoric, or not rhetoric, but we've heard a lot of news lately about the coronavirus and viruses in general and how they work. And, basically, like humans, if an ecosystem has really impaired health in some way, it's more susceptible to be invaded. It's less able to fend off these species. Just like, a human, your body would interact with a virus. So how do invasive species get here in the first place? Well, there are a variety of ways, but really what it boils down to is that they're transported, often unintentionally, by people. Often in shipping materials, sometimes as garden species, or aquarium species in the case of some of the aquatics. In the 1800s, if we're talking about plants, in the 1800s, East Asian style gardens were in vogue, so a lot of species were brought over that are now problematic. Sometimes people release pets. The red-eared slider pictured here is an example of a pet that has been released often enough that this species has actually started a population here in the Northeast, and tends to bully out native turtles. It's doing quite well here. So that's another way. And really, anytime you move dirt, compost, if you move your boat from water body to water body, invasive species can cling to that, and be transported that way. A really common mechanism of transport for aquatic invasive species is ship ballast. So that's water that a ship will take on at one location to sort of help with the balance and maybe release at another location. And that's a really common way for these species to be brought over accidentally. And where are they spreading? Like I said, transport is a really common mechanism for the spread of these species. Long Island for a long time has been a huge center of trade. And so, because of New York City and, the history here, so Long Island and sort of the metropolitan area is really a hotspot for invasive species introduction. This map came from a study on invasive pest species. So that's, insects and pathogens. More than 40 invasive forest pest species, established in the tri-state area, and Suffolk County is the worst of all of these places, is the hotspot for these species to come in. So it's a particularly big problem on Long Island that these species are coming in. So what's the strategy? How do we deal with them? So this graph right here is what we call the invasion curve. And basically what it shows is sort of the progression of an invasion. So at the beginning, you know, when a species has just become introduced, you know, it's easy to sort of eradicate it. You know, it's right, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but right at the yellow part of the graph, it's sort of low in abundance, and you can eradicate a species like this without so much cost, and that's, you know, monetary cost and cost of labor. And then as the invasion grows and as time passes and as the species becomes widespread, it's becomes really challenging, and, you know, in some cases really nearly impossible to do anything about these species, just because the cost of control and, you know, the cost of, you know, monetary and the cost of the human labor that would be required would be so immense. And so, you know, we kind of operate in a situation, you know, the situation that Long Island is in, where we're constantly dealing with new invasive species. We're sort of operating somewhere in the sort of light orange area, you know, where we're trying to get to species before they become too costly to control. Unfortunately, we don't, you know, we don't always know that a species is invasive until it's here and it's behaving badly, and we can observe that behavior. So, you know, our awareness of the species and the public awareness in general often doesn't start until, you know, the species is kind of far along in this progression. So the first part of the curve here addresses the most efficient thing that you can do to keep invasive species from becoming a problem, which is prevention. You know, trying to keep invasive species from establishing in the first place, keeping them from moving around. You know, so ways that, you know, we can all help do this is when we go hiking, clean off our shoes, you know, try not to carry around little pieces of dirt from preserve to preserve. That can make a really immense difference. You know, for aquatics, which we're focusing on today, you know, check your boat. You know, make sure that you're not holding any water in your boat, that there are no plant matter stuck to your boat. You know, and let your boat dry completely before you take it to a new body of water. A lot of pests, insects and pathogens make it move around in firewood. So, you know, buying firewood locally or buying heat treated firewood can prevent that. And another aspect of prevention that's really important is to keep the ecosystems healthy and resilient. Like I was saying before, if an ecosystem is healthy and intact and strong, there's a lower chance that an invasive species will be able to come in and take over. And so the Long Island Sound study is doing incredible work kind of trying to keep that condition for the estuary ecosystems around the Long Island Sound. And Jimena mentioned restoration before. That's a really important component of this. You know, degraded areas might need a little TLC and restoration to make sure that, you know, native species come back instead of invasive species that'll just outcompete everything. And something that we can all do, you know, of course, is plant native species in your garden or in your aquarium. You know, use native species, you know, especially if, you know, you're dumping out your aquarium every so often outside. You'd be surprised how many species can survive, how many invasive aquatic species can survive dry conditions, you know, for a while. So, you know, for resources on how to kind of do this, please visit our website. And I also just want to bring out the Long Island Native Plant Initiative here, which is our sister organization on Long Island. And they do a lot of work related to restoration and encouraging people to plant native in their garden. They collect native seeds from plants all over the island. They grow them in greenhouses, and then they use them for restoration or sell them at plant sales for gardeners. And they'll be having a plant sale this fall, I believe. Okay, so if we can't, you know, prevent an invasion, an invasive species from coming in, you know, through brushing our boots and cleaning materials and all that. And, you know, obviously invasive species make it in anyway all the time, despite prevention efforts. We move to a stage of what we call early detection and rapid response, or EDRR, where we hope that, you know, we can catch invasive species early on enough that we can eradicate them. And, you know, like I said, one of the problems is that public awareness typically begins, you know, at a point where, you know, it's becoming incredibly costly to control invasive species. So to try to deter that today, the invasive species that I went over with you, these are all emerging threats to the island's coasts. And, you know, if they're colonizing or if they are spreading beyond where we think they might be, you know, we need to know about that. So perennial pepperweed, to our knowledge, is only near the West Meadow Beach area and the Flax Pond area. Asiatic sand sedge, I believe, and Bill, chime in the comments if this isn't correct, but I believe that Asiatic sand sedge right now is confined to the south coast, the Atlantic Ocean coast. Waterwheel has actually not been observed on Long Island yet, you know, but we need eyes out in the field, because if this thing comes in, it could spread extremely rapidly. And the Chinese mitten crab, you know, aquatic invasive species are incredibly difficult for us to monitor and track, just because of the logistics of actually taking, you know, samples from aquatic ecosystems. And, you know, the fact that these species move around so much, I mean, 11 miles a day for the Chinese mitten crab. So, you know, any report about the Chinese mitten crab we can get to understand its distribution better would be helpful in controlling it. And ultimately, we never know which emerging species could be next, you know, with all the transport going on Long Island, who knows? And so we always try to be diligent, and this is kind of where our interest in the Bioblitz comes in. So basically, you know, we need your eyes on the ground to sort of help us figure out where these species are coming in. And a Bioblitz is really helpful for us, but it's also a really fun way to learn about the nature that, you know, we all love and what's going on around you, what species are around you. So what is a Bioblitz? It's essentially an effort to record as many species as possible within a designated location and time frame. So our time frame is June 15th to the 26th. And our designated location is, you know, somewhere on the north coast of Long Island. But if you can't make it to the north coast, we would love to have your participation anyway. You know, you could try to find a more local coastal ecosystem to you, like the coast of a river perhaps, or a wetland. Or if not, you know, just go out into your own backyard and help us document species there. That's really important too. Who participates in a Bioblitz? Citizen scientists like you. We hope that you all join us. It's a great activity for students. You know, it's a great way to get kids out exploring. And so, you know, we hope that, you know, if there are educators on the call, that you'll share this with your students. If there are parents on the call, you'll share this with your children. It's a lot of fun. Why do a Bioblitz? Like I said, we need your help to detect these new invasive species early enough so that we can actually do something about them. And it's really fun. It's really fun to kind of explore what's all around you. Like I said, our time frame is June 15th to 26th. And how do you participate? Well, we're going to be documenting our observations using a free mobile app called iNaturalist. And I'm going to go into a tutorial on how to use that. It's super, super easy. But I guess first, this would probably be a good time to pause and see if there are any questions. And I believe that questions are being entered into the chat.
Yes.
Lindsay, I have a question here from Kathy. I am
Yes.
in Queens and go to Alley Creek, Alley Pond, which is North Shore. Does New York City count?
Absolutely. Yes, New York City absolutely counts. And that's actually really cool because I grew up super close to Alley Pond. So I'm so happy that you mentioned it. Yeah, so LIISMA's work covers Nassau County and Suffolk County and Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So anywhere you are on Long Island or Staten Island, please join us. And Alley Pond Park is a great place
Of
to
course,
go.
the Long Island, Sound Study also covers New York City.
Yes. And
Go ahead.
Jimena, you might want to talk more about that. You cover Manhattan as well, right?
We cover Suffolk, Nassau, Queens, Bronx, and Westchester.
So anywhere, in that area, please join us. But like I said, if you can't make it to an area that's near the North Shore, traveling is not the easiest right now. If you can get out into some nature and help us with the Bioblitz, any nature you can get to, even if it's just your backyard or a nearby park or something like that. Okay, so the other day I went to West Meadow Beach to take some pictures, and I just happened to come across a whole bunch of these crabs. And I took some pictures of these crabs, and I just wanted to show you that this is what I'm going to be using for the iNaturalist demo today. So we're gonna try to identify this crab species, and I am going to pull up my phone here. Just bear with me. Okay, so actually, before we get started with the phone, the first thing that you need to do to participate is go to iNaturalist.org, and let me reshare my screen so I can show this to you. Okay, so I think you can all see that. Hopefully you can. So basically the first step is to just go to iNaturalist.org and click sign up in the corner right there. And enter your credentials and hit create an account. You can also log in with Facebook or with Google. And then after that step, you're going to want to head to your phone app store, and you're going to want to download the iNaturalist app. And I'm just going back to the main page to show you that this is the logo that you're going to be looking for on the app, the little bird over here. And then after that, you're ready to use the app. So now I'm going to head over to my phone. All right, so when you download iNaturalist, you're gonna open up the app, and mine is right here, whoops. And when you open it up, if you've never used it before and this is your first time making an account, this page is gonna be empty, but this is kind of your home tab. If you look at the bottom, there's a bar, and what's highlighted right now is a little person that says me. So this is your homepage, and these are all the observations that I've submitted to iNaturalist. So, when you have made some observations, this is where you'll go to revisit them, and this is the screen that comes up when you open the app. So to log an observation, all you have to do is click the little camera button in the middle on the bottom bar, hit observe. And at this point, you're going to be able to take a photo of any species that you see, plant, animal, bug, crab, it doesn't matter. You can take a photo, and mine is dark right now because my phone is on the table. Or you can pick a photo that you've previously taken. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to choose the photos of those crabs that I was just showing you before. Let's scroll back up here. So there's one. I just want to point out that, it's really important to get a nice, clear, crisp shot. Sometimes, species have lookalikes, and it's always good to get a clear shot if you can. And if you can't, or even if you can, it's always good to log a few different pictures of the species that you see, just to get different angles here. So I rushed through that quickly, but when I hit next and it the phone picked up my photo, it brought me to this screen. And to add another photo, all you have to do is in the top left corner there, hit the plus button, and that brings you back to the camera and the option to select a photo. So I have 3 photos of this crab, and I'm just going to go and get the third one here. Okay, so it's got my 3 crab photos here, and all I have to do now is hit that bar underneath the pictures that says, "What did you see?" And within seconds, this awesome app has generated a list of possible identities for this crab. And so the first thing it tells me is that it's pretty sure that my crab is in the genus Leptuca. And then if you scroll down, it gives the top 10 suggestions for which species the crab might be. So just looking at this, I'm seeing a lot of something fiddler crabs. So that's a good clue that, my crab might be some kind of fiddler crab. And, I'm not really sure which one. So the way that you kind of check and figure out which it is that you hit the little I, to the right of the species name. So I'm just looking at the top one here, Atlantic sand fiddler crab. That sounds pretty good. We're near the Atlantic Ocean. So I'm going to click that I right there to get more information about the species. And iNaturalist will bring you to a page where you can scroll to see more photos of this crab. So this is looking good. This is looking similar to what we saw, or to what I saw. It's got the same kind of purple marking on the head, the same small claw on one side and big claw on the other side. I did see them going in and out of little burrows like that on the beach. And if I scroll down a bit here, iNaturalist also shows me a distribution map of where the species has been observed. So I can see that it's been observed all up and down the east coast of the US. And it's been observed plenty right on Long Island. So that's looking pretty good. I do want to point out that if this crab had a Wikipedia article associated with it, that there would be a preview of that on this page too. And, that's where you would get some more information about, what the crab is and its native range and all of that. That's not here because this crab does not have a Wikipedia entry associated with it, but you can click more info on iNaturalist.org at the bottom there, and you'll get more detailed information about the crab. So, you can kind of, when you're out in the field, you can kind of go through the first couple options. I'm going to just look at the second one real quick. The West African fiddler crab, I doubt it. We're obviously not in West Africa, but just to check it out. Okay, yeah, this crab looks really different. It's much more square, much darker than what I saw, and I can kind of look through the rest. I'm seeing, the others don't really look similar. I'm pretty confident that it's the Atlantic sand fiddler crab. So when you've kind of decided on your observation, just go ahead and click on the name, and it brings you back to this main screen, except before in that bar below the photos where it said, what did I see before? Now it says the name of the species that you select. And then if you go down a bit, you can enter any notes that you might want about the observation, or you could skip that. iNaturalist picks up the date and time that you took the observation. And it also picks up the location if you took the photo and you have your location services set so that iNaturalist can access that. If you're like me and you're entering a photo that you took a while ago, you can click on the map here, or the where it says no location, and it's being a little bit slow because I'm using my phone's hotspot to do all of this. But you can choose where you were, so I would let this load, and then I would choose like somewhere at West Meadow Beach, and it was south of the education center, so probably like there-ish. Okay, hit save. It's a lot better if you have your location services turned on, and if you are taking observations, at the time when you're in the field. I'm only doing this because I'm showing it to you and at my desk and everything. But for the purposes of the Bioblitz, it's really essential that we know where these species that you're finding are. If you choose not to put your location services on, there are obviously privacy concerns out there, but iNaturalist isn't using your data for anything. And ultimately, it's so helpful for naturalists and conservationists like Jimena and I. If you find a really incredible species, maybe a really awesome, maybe rare species, if we don't know where it is, we can't do anything to protect it. Likewise, if you find a really horrible invasive species that we want to eradicate right away, but you don't have that location service turned on, there's nothing we can do to eradicate it. You know, the likelihood of finding it again is slim. So, you know, we ask for the purposes of this Bioblitz that you do leave the location services so that iNaturalist can access your location just while you're using the app. I do want to flag below that there's a field called geoprivacy. That actually doesn't have anything to do with your location services. What that has to do with is who can see the location of your observation, you know, when they're looking through the the iNaturalist database. And the purpose of this is, you know, let's say you are out on a survey for a species that you know is endangered or sensitive or something like that. And you know, you want to have this data for yourself and maybe for a few other people, but you don't want, you know, the whole world to be able to see where you found a species. So you can change this permission to obscured or even private. And the difference here is just that with obscured, it's the level of you know, permissions, how many people are allowed to see the location. I think when the observation is obscured, a few people can see it depending on how you set your settings in iNaturalist. And when it's private, I believe it's only you. But for the purposes of the Bioblitz, you know, leave the geoprivacy open. iNaturalist does automatically obscure the locations of species that are listed as rare, you know, by the IUCN, the International Authority on that. So if, you know, if you're concerned, don't worry too much. It's kind of like an extra level of precaution. You can also specify here whether the species is captive or cultivated. You know, maybe you want to use iNaturalist to figure out what's in your garden or what this cool house plant that you have is, or even what's floating around in your aquarium. And you can do that. And that's a great thing to use iNaturalist for. Just specify that, you know, your species is captive so that no one thinks it's, you know, some crazy tropical flower is out there in nature. And the last kind of item on this list here is the project field. For some Bioblitzes, you need to explicitly join a project, but Jimena and I set our Bioblitz up so that you do not have to do that. If you go out and you take observations with iNaturalist, and it's within, you know, the bounds that we're interested in, which we described before, and it's during the time frame from the 15th to the 26th, it's automatically going to be added to our Bioblitz. So you don't have to worry about this. You know, you're not going to be shut out of that. And so when all that's done, you go ahead and you just click share, and that's it. That's all you have to do. So, you know, I spent a lot of time kind of going through these different fields sort of below here, but really this is super quick in the field. You take some pictures, you know, you click what did I see, you take a few minutes to figure it out, and then, you know, you just hit share most of the time. You don't change any of these settings. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit share. And when I do, my list comes back up, and you can see that, you know, it's syncing up, it's trying to upload it. If I'm in a spot that doesn't have good connectivity, what would happen is that it wouldn't really try to upload it. You would see a little icon on the right side of the observation, like a little cloud, you know, saying we couldn't upload this right now, you know, but when you get home or something, you know, click that cloud and the observation will be added. So that's it. That's all that you have to do. And one thing that I just want to point out about iNaturalist is that, you know, it's really a community of naturalists. And, you know, obviously, we hope that you'll all participate in this Bioblitz. And so that's a real community use of iNaturalist. But even on the app, there's some level of interaction. So if you look, you know, in my list of observations here, you can see that some of them have little like comment bubbles next to them on the right. And so I'll just show you that really quickly. I practiced a few days ago on this Atlantic sand fiddler crab. You know, so I have that observation here again. And just to show you what it looks like when you click back into your observation, you see the photo you took, and you see the location where you took the observation. and you see the identification that you gave it. And if you click in the middle next to that eye, there's like a message icon with 3 dots. You click on that, and it gives you kind of like a message thread of what happened. So a lot of the time, these messages will be a confirmation of your identification or an alternative suggestion. You know, maybe your observation is actually something else. And so basically what happened here is, you know, I identify this, I'm Li Charlotte, so the top one is me. I identified the species as the Atlantic sand fiddler crab, and then these 2 other users seconded my observation, which is really great. So, you know, you can also write text in here, you can comment. So really at the bottom, you see comment on the left or suggest ID on the right. So those are kind of your 2 options for interacting with other users. And sometimes, you know, fun little conversations happen on here about the plants that you're seeing. So that's great. So that's basically all there is to using iNaturalist. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Lindsay, this is Bill. There's a question about location services.
Yes.
Can location services be turned on and off for use only when doing a recording of a species?
Yes, so if you go into the privacy settings of your phone, and this varies by phone, so I'm not going to show you on, you know, my iPhone, but if you go into your phone's privacy settings, you can set the location services so that iNaturalist can access your location only when you're using the app, and then it can't when you're not using the app. So when you shut out of the app, you know, it stops collecting your info. So that's what I would recommend doing. Okay, I see one more question in here asking me how I got to the screen that I'm on now. And that was sent about a minute ago, but I'll just walk through this one more time quickly. So this is my list of observations, and this is the screen that opens up when you first open the app. And this is also the screen that you go back to once you've shared the observation. So, you know, this is kind of your home screen, and you come back here. So I'll just click really quickly on the observation. You just click on the observation that you made. And this is where you see, you know, the details that you entered. And if you want to see what messages people might have for you, you know, you go down to the middle of the screen. There's below where it says Atlantic sand fiddler crab, there's like tabs there. So right now the eye to the left is highlighted in green. If you want to see your messages, you just click on that little message bubble with the 3 dots. Okay. And then, you know, so I was here at this dots, and then to go back home at the top left, just click, you know, your username there, and that takes you back home. Okay, so I don't believe there are any more questions on that.
All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. Oh, there's an extra question. I've tried to do this with some sort of insect I saw, and the ID was for a salamander. Interesting.
Sometimes, you know, like I said, it's really helpful to get multiple angles, you know, to make sure that the shot is really nice and clear. Sometimes if it's a little blurry or something, the ID will be off. But, you know, from using this app for a while now, and, you know, from kind of feedback from other naturalists, this app is really incredible. I'll give you an example. The other day I saw this bug crawling around. It was like it looked like a beetle to me. I saw it crawling around a potted plant in my house. I took a picture of it, and it gave me ladybug. And I was like, this is definitely not a ladybug. But then I started doing some research into ladybugs, and I found out that in fact it was a larval stage of ladybug. So the app is really incredible. And I would recommend, if you're getting a species that's like completely off, it's probably because the picture needs to be just a bit clearer.
Is it useful also to have some sort of size reference in the shot, I imagine?
Yes, it can be. You know, you could use a penny or your finger if it's a plant. That can be very useful, yes. I just want to point out that, you know, iNaturalist has great resources for, you know, how to use the app on their website, which is iNaturalist.org. You know, so today I showed you how to use iNaturalist on an iPhone, but there's kind of this graphic here for iPhone users, but there's also a guide on how to use iNaturalist for Android users. So I do want to point out that that is available to you on the website.
Right. And we can link this too in our Facebook page.
Yes, we will do that. That's a good
I'll post,
idea.
yeah. Here, I'm gonna put the link in the chat.
So once you're all set up with iNaturalist, what are the actual logistics of participating? You know, the Bioblitz itself is it's from June 15th to 26th, like I said, and it's self-led. So any opportunity that you might have to participate, to get out into nature, onto the coast, near the coast, you know, and you can snap some observations into iNaturalist. We so appreciate you doing so. We recommend spending, you know, finding 30 minutes and just spending that chunk of time finding and logging species. But, you know, if you're out on a walk and you see something that's cool, you know, and you just want to snap a photo of that and go out on about your day, that's fine too. And again, if you can't get to a Long Island Sound coastal ecosystem, you know, please participate wherever you are. And just a few recommendations for, you know, we recommend that you take safety precautions in the field. Obviously right now, social distancing is really important. Children should be supervised by an adult. Always in the field, wherever you go out in the field, you should let someone know where you're going or go with someone. And make sure that if you're, you know, walking off of trails, or even if you're on a trail, really take appropriate precautions for poison ivy, ticks, and other, you know, biting insects and possibly irritating plants and whatnot. And most importantly, have fun. It's really great to kind of get out there and just go exploring, and to have this resource, you know, kind of, you can now figure out what species are all around you for free without using, you know, bulky field guides and things like that. So it's a lot of fun to go explore and figure out, you know, exactly what's going on around you, what species are around you. To have that knowledge makes you feel grounded, I find. So I really love it. And, you know, we hope you'll join us. For more info and updates, go ahead and check out our Facebook event. You can find that on both of the Long Island Sound Studies and Long Island Invasive Species Management Area's Facebook page. I believe Jimena is posting it. I can't see the chat right now,
Yeah.
but I think she posted it. Okay. And we hope that you'll share what you find on Facebook on that event. You know, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll be out there sharing too. So that's really what I've got. And thank you all so much. And, you know, I hope that you'll participate in the Bioblitz.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. And just also wanted to mention that we're going to be repeating the same webinar on Thursday at 6 for people who were not able to join today. So if you found this useful, please feel free to share that news with anybody who you think might find this useful. Lindsay, we also got an extra comment / question. Someone asked, can you explain the purpose of people commenting on the iNaturalist app, please? It seems like a cool concept there.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of commenting on the Facebook event, you know, we kind of hope that this is like a community event that, you know, it's difficult to kind of come together during these times, you know, when we're all social distancing. But, you know, Jimena and I hope that it's a fun way for us to kind of connect over what we're finding, and share our discoveries. And, you know, maybe other naturalists besides Jimena and I will weigh in and you know, contribute some insights about what we're seeing. And Jimena and I will certainly be on there, you know, looking at what you've got. And, you know, we'll be searching through the database as well, to see to see what's being reported. So that's kind of the purpose of that. In terms of commenting in iNaturalist, you can comment on an observation that you're submitting. I'm not sure if that's what you mean or if you mean commenting in the Facebook group. But the purpose of commenting on an iNaturalist observation is just to note some extra details about your observation that might maybe help you find it later or something, you know, or help you remember the significance of it. Hope that answered the question.
Right. I think it's also to allow for naturalists to kind of discuss, right, apart from just suggesting IDs. So yeah, so with that, thank you again so much for coming. We invite you to participate and to, you know, it's hard to stay connected in these weird virtual times, but if you are participating with your family or you know, with whoever, please feel absolutely free to, you can post on our Facebook page and update us on how you're doing, what you found, and we'll be posting updates throughout the Bioblitz on what people have found and what cool species have been found where, and educational tidbits here and there. So with that, I think if no one else has any questions, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much again, Lindsay and Bill and Nancy and Karen, and to all of you for attending. Anything else, Lindsay?
I do just want to mention that New York's, for the educators who might be on the call, New York State does have a curriculum for educating students about invasive species. It's geared towards middle schoolers and high schoolers. And you know, I offer workshops and trainings on how to use the curriculum. And so if you're interested in that, I just put up Jimena's and my contact information. You know, so if you have any questions either about the Bioblitz or, you know, if you're interested in some of the other resources that we have available, please reach out to us.
All right, perfect. Well, with that, we'll call it a day. Thank you everyone for joining. We hope to see you at the virtual Bioblitz. And again, feel free to reach out to us and join the conversation in iNaturalist and the Facebook page. All right, everyone have a great afternoon.